Today, we are going to dive into three really powerful stories. They come from a foundational ancient text, and each one gives us a totally different angle on what it means to be ready, for a final test. Let's break down what they're trying to tell us.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is the big question, isn't it? It's something we all think about. How are we supposed to live our lives right now, knowing that some kind of final reckoning could be right around the corner? Or maybe it's still a really long way off. Now, the source material we're looking at doesn't just hand us one simple answer. Nope. Instead, it gives us three separate stories, three parables, that kind of build on each other to paint this really rich, complex picture of what it truly means to be ready.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with that big question of readiness. Then we're going to jump into our three stories, the waiting game, the investment test, and the final exam. And to wrap it all up, we'll look for the common thread that ties everything together.
Okay, so our first story. Picture this. 10 young women, all waiting for a bridegroom to show up for a wedding. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? But it's actually a huge lesson in foresight. It's all about being prepared for a wait that could be way longer than you expect. So this slide really breaks down the one thing that separated the two groups. See, all 10 of them had lamps. And hey, all 10 of them fell asleep while they were waiting. The difference, as you can see, is that 5 were wise. They thought ahead, they figured there might be a delay, and they brought extra oil. The other 5, well, they were foolish. They only prepared for right now. And in the end, that one little bit of planning made all the difference.
And here's the real kicker. His arrival was a total surprise. The text says it happened suddenly, at midnight. It was a real test of endurance. And of course, the foolish virgins, their lamps were all sputtering out. They had to run off to find more oil, and by then, well, it was just too late.
And the ending is just brutal. The door gets shut in their faces, and the bridegroom says, "I don't know you." So the main takeaway from this first story is pretty clear. Readiness means being vigilant. It means having the foresight to prepare for a future that you just can't predict. So let's move on to our second story, and you'll see how this idea starts to get deeper. This one isn't just about waiting around. It's about what you're supposed to do while you wait. This is a story about being an active, productive steward of whatever you've been given. So a master gives his money to 3 servants before he leaves on a long trip. This table lays it out perfectly. The first 2 guys, they go out, they invest the money, and they double it, and they get praised for it. But look at that third servant. His story and the master's reaction is a whole lot different. Now, his excuse is what's really fascinating here. He says he was afraid. He knew his master was tough, so out of fear of messing up, he just did nothing. He played it safe. He literally buried the gold just to make sure he could give back exactly what he got. No more, no less. And the master's reaction? He is furious. He calls the servant wicked and lazy. He basically says, look, you could have done the bare minimum. You could have just put the money in a bank to get some interest. Doing nothing because you're scared is seen as a complete and total failure. So you see how this adds a new layer to the first story, right? Being ready isn't just about passively waiting with your lamp full of oil. It's about actively using what you've been given. This story is telling us that our gifts, our talents, they're meant to be grown, not just hidden away. And that brings us to our final story. This one is probably the most direct and maybe the most challenging of all. If the first one was about being vigilant and the second was about taking action, this last one tells us exactly how that action is going to be judged. So in this final scene, a king separates everybody into 2 groups, just like a shepherd separating sheep from goats. And the outcomes couldn't be more different. One group gets to inherit the kingdom. The other is sent away. And the one thing that separates them, it's all about how they treated other people. I mean, just look at this list the king uses for his judgment. It's not about what they believed or how much money they made or what they accomplished. The final exam, the whole thing, is graded on these simple, real, tangible acts of kindness to people who were struggling. And here it is. This is the big reveal, the mic drop moment of the story. The king says that all those little acts of kindness, feeding someone who is hungry, visiting someone who is sick, were actually being done directly to him. The true measure of a person's life is how they treat the most vulnerable people around them. But here's the part that just blows my mind. Neither group knew what was going on at the time. Both the sheep and the goats are totally confused. They both ask, wait, when did we see you hungry or thirsty? They were just living their lives. Their compassion, or their lack of it, was just an automatic, ingrained part of who they were. Okay, so how do we connect these dots? We have a story about waiting for a wedding, a story about investing money, and a story about a final judgment. They seem pretty different, right? Let's pull it all together and see what the common thread is.
When you lay them all out, you get this amazing three-dimensional picture of what it means to be ready. The first story tells us to be vigilant, to always be prepared. The second story says, okay, but that preparation has to be active. You have to use what you've got. And then the third story gives us the ultimate purpose for that action. It has to be driven by compassion for other people. So here's the bottom line. These ancient stories are arguing that being truly ready for the future isn't just one thing. It's a whole way of being. It's this combination of foresight, of productive action, and of a deep, ingrained character of kindness. And that really leaves all of us with a pretty big question to think about. If this is the test, how are we preparing for it?